with Darryl Morris on TalkRadio.
So, in the meantime, the Oktoberfest event has been cancelled in Germany. This is a big moment. It's a big moment, not least because it's a huge event that employs a lot of people and keeps a lot of people happy, but it's also a big moment because it's quite a bit far down the line, right? We're talking about events and stuff being back on by September, October. Bavaria, the Bavarian village there, are taking the lead. And they are saying that the Oktoberfest is simply not going to come together, and it's not going to happen. This has a huge impact, and the impact of the coronavirus on the events industry is really, really profound. Let's take stock of that right now and talk about the Oktoberfest and beyond with Charlotte Gentry, who is the founder and the CEO of Pure Events and Communications, and joins you now. Charlotte, hi.
Hi there, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay, thank you, Charlotte. You would ordinarily send people and people that you work with, clients, etc., to the Oktoberfest. I know it's not something that you sort of deal with as your sole thing, but if you can, just from your perspective, firstly, Charlotte, give us a bit of a sense of just how big an event Oktoberfest actually is.
Oktoberfest is absolutely huge. I mean, it's not just huge in terms of the number of people that go every year, but also as a brand. It's been a very very popular event to take people to on an annual basis, and so obviously the fact that it's been cancelled is quite a major statement by Germany. But probably a very necessary one as well at this time, due to the fact that clearly public safety is first and foremost on everybody's minds.
And the impact, though, is going to be enormous. Naturally, of course, our first primary concern is the health and the well-being of the people that would go to this and would mingle in close proximity. But presumably the economic fallout from it will be enormous.
Yeah, I think the economic fallout for the cancellation of events in general across Europe, alongside the UK, is very sizable. And I think really what, as an industry that accounts for 70 billion in revenues coming into the UK on an annual basis, really as an industry we're calling for the support from the government really to help us navigate our way through this pandemic, which is becoming, a bigger and bigger economic issue alongside the health issues that it's causing as well. So I think the bigger challenge really is the level of uncertainty that we all have about how long this is likely to go on for, in terms of the putting life on pause, I suppose, which is where we are as an industry, and not really having the information to hand in terms of what the government are likely to do and perhaps some of the information that's coming out of the government. So really, I think the difficulty that a lot of people in our industry are facing is the huge level of uncertainty. And events obviously being postponed to later on in the year into Q4, which is all well and good. But at the end of the day, that also begs the question of whether or not delegates will actually be able to attend events in Q4, because you have to have the lead time to actually get delegates to sign up to these events. And if that lead time is simply not there because the confidence in the global markets isn't there, and people aren't prepared to travel, and people are still concerned for their own safety and well-being, then that's the biggest challenge of all, to actually enabling these events to take place.
And I suppose on that front, the cancelling of Oktoberfest, which is at the start of quarter four, mid-September into October, worsens all of those things. All of those fears and those concerns deepen, presumably, and it heightens all of those issues that you've just outlined, and suggests actually that these kind of events just are not going to happen in quarter four in the way that perhaps what we're anticipating, and maybe hoping that they will.
I mean, there has to be a huge feeling of optimism and positivity, because at the end of the day, as an industry sector, we are very robust, we are very positive, we're very collaborative in our approach. However, at the end of the day, the biggest challenge that we face is actually a lot of organisations who produce these big events. How do we actually get the delegates and the visitors to these events that are scheduled to take place in Q4 if the confidence isn't there over the course of the summer? And I think that's the bigger challenge. And so therefore, will they continue to get pushed into Q1 of 2021? And yet nobody's really got the absolute answer to that. I think we are all keeping a very positive mindset currently that events in Q4 will take place because things are still changing on a weekly basis. You know, we're experiencing, an extension of lockdown for another couple of weeks, and then we have to see what happens after that. And so people are acclimatising and we're adapting to government plans on a weekly basis. And as frustrating as it is, and certainly as an industry of planners, we're unable to plan anything really effectively at the moment because we have to live in a very short-term view.
Yeah, and that's
based on the information that's being dished out to us by the government, who also, let's not forget, are also navigating their own way through something that they haven't experienced before. So we're all sitting in an anomaly of a situation.
And so you've referenced wanting some more support from the government, Charlotte. What does that mean? What are you looking for?
I think there are many businesses that are that are going to flounder in this current situation. I think funding is one of them because in many situations we're not actually eligible for business rates relief, as an example. Unlike the hospitality industry, which has been horribly badly hit, they can get business rates relief, which we're not actually eligible for if you operate out of an office rather than a restaurant or a shop front. But I think also just we're all navigating our way through furloughing issues. And trying to also do the right thing that we can for the freelance market as well, who are really horribly hit because they are actually at the bottom of the food chain, and a lot of them won't see any revenues coming through from the government until June. So we're all trying to help and protect people within the industry as much as we possibly can do. So I think, like everybody, funding is one area, but also raising our profile of how badly hit we actually are as a sector as well. That it's not just bars and restaurants. We are a huge generator of revenue into this country, which equates to £70 billion worth, and that revenue is going to be badly hit over the next 6 months or so.
And I put my cards on the table here, Charlotte. I set up a business last year with the sort of modus operandi of and the sort of the main kind of business plan really was that I was going to provide content to events, right? So if a big event was happening, and we've got a couple of contracts with a couple of big events companies, a couple of UK-based festivals, we do all their sort of backstage content and interview the artists and all that sort of stuff and produce content for them to use on their socials. And so our two planets sort of fly quite close to each other. And the reason
I'd say you're in a very good position.
Well, the reason that I said is that the business is fine because we can repurpose and do other stuff and we make other content. But the reason that I bring that up, Charlotte, is because everybody that I have communicated with, every company that we've done business with, every sort of person that we have a relationship with in those organisations have either lost their job, they've been furloughed, or they are trying to figure out how they repurpose their business to try and do something else for this period, and potentially, as you say there, for a longer period, maybe into next year. And those are people who have families, they've got lives, they've got things to buy, they've got, they need to keep their head above water. If we just take a pause and a breath and a step back, Charlotte, can you just give us a bit of a sense of how personally impactful this is on the people who operate within this industry?
I mean, it is impacting people it's impacting absolutely everybody. And actually, I don't necessarily think that it's not just, obviously it's impacting irrespective of which industry you're in, you are affected in some way or another. I think the challenge is that if you are a business owner, you are having to, such as myself, you are navigating your way through furlough situations that you've never had to go through before, really understanding what that means, really trying to navigate your way through the information that's being given to you by the government, and understanding what that really means in practice, not just in theory. So I think, I think if you are we're in a situation where quite a few of our clients have also, as you mentioned, been furloughed. So it's finding a middle ground of being very compassionate about who is being horribly affected, because essentially if you're delivering events, and if you are a deliverer of events, you essentially don't have a role to play, really, within the next 6 to 8 months. And so that's the biggest challenge, and one therefore has to adapt. And if you don't adapt your business or your service offering, you will have a very big challenge on your hands over the next 6 months. So leading back to what you were saying that you had done in terms of producing and delivering content for various businesses or agencies or whoever it was that you were appealing to. We've had to do exactly the same, and actually have repositioned our brand from Pure Events to the Pure Communications Group, which happened actually to be just a very coincidental timing because we've been working on it for 6 months. But the adapting to more of a communication style of service offering is what I believe a lot of people in the events industry are going to have to do, because the live events piece is actually the end product of a much greater communication strategy. And now what's really interesting is that communications has become more and more important than anything else during this time, because we're all working from home. We can't just turn around and have a conversation with the person sitting at the desk next to us. Instead, we have to find other modes of communication, and that's all happening at the moment online. So, modes such as Zoom or WebEx or whatever have now become your greatest friend. And actually, ironically, you're communicating far more with far many greater amounts of people on a daily basis, because you have to, because you can't just turn around and have the conversation with somebody in the same room. So you find you're on back-to-back conference calls, and instead you're talking to your clients about how they're actually going to communicate with their clients and their internal stakeholders and colleagues and staff over the next 6 months, because life will eventually have to continue, and we're still in crisis mode. My personal belief is that we will come out of crisis mode and we will head more into a proactive mode, whether that's May or June, but there will have to be a stage where we have to move on from where we currently sit. And the only way that we can move on is by adapting that service offering, and it's largely through a greater communication strategy, and content and messaging is absolutely pivotal to that.
And also, it's quite culturally impactful as well, isn't it, Charlotte? Because these events bring us creativity and innovation and well-being as well. And there's no lack of creativity at the moment. In fact, plenty of people are being perhaps more creative with the time that they've got on their hands. But in terms of the sort of all the ways that the events and festivals and getting out and the socialising impact is playing out, is affecting us, it's really quite profound as well, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I don't think life will be the same again after all of this. I think we're all just going to have to adapt the way that we behave and the way that we think. Having said that, there's no way really to replace that face-to-face contact and that face-to-face experience that you have at a live event, at a festival, at a concert, at any large gathering. It doesn't matter how amazing your AI is. It doesn't matter how fabulous your virtual conferencing methods are, whatever it is. That face-to-face engagement and experience, you can't indefinitely replace that with something virtually. And so those events will have to come back. And God willing, they will in 2021. But I suspect that it's just not going to happen over the course of this year. And I think even if you're doing smaller events for up to 1,000 people for corporates, again, will the economic confidence be there in order for those to actually take place at the end of this year? And I think that that's still debatable. But yet we have to, we've been very fortunate in that very few of the events that we've had planned for our clients have been cancelled. They've just been postponed and shifted. And a lot of them actually have been shifted into next year. But therefore, we've had to just change the way in which we're communicating with our clients in terms of what their needs are. And talking to them in a much broader capacity about where their challenges are and actually where we can really add the value now.
And can I we're slightly out of time, Charlotte, so just briefly, if you will, but can I ask, when you're having those kind of conversations, and I suppose when you're in your own thinking as well, when you're thinking about your own sort of strategy over the next what could be 12 months, 2 years really, how much attention are you paying to what the scientists are saying? We heard Professor Chris Whitty today, for example, Charlotte, said that it was wholly unrealistic, was his words, to expect life to suddenly return back to normal. It could be something of a year or so before we get back to being able to have big events. And he doesn't really see a way of that happening until, or at least certainly us being able to kind of move around and be together in the same sort of way until we have a vaccine developed and being used en masse. You also have to play into that the sort of behavioural science and the way that people may be reluctant, potentially even this time next year and next summer, to go to large gatherings and events. Are you kind of taking that on board and using that information and being honest with your clients and honest with yourself, or are you kind of still hoping to find a way through that, what the science is saying on that front?
I think we have to be completely guided by the science and what the government is actually saying to us, and really believe in that information that's being given to us, because they're being guided by scientists, within the realms of what we're experiencing now. And I think that things will have to shift and change. It's very, very hard to pinpoint the time frame over the course of this year, about whether or not things are just going to shift entirely into next year, and whether or not people are really going to have the confidence to have mass gatherings in the future. But I think we have to take on board what the information that's being given to us, and we have to adapt accordingly based on what that information is. I mean, I think if you just sit in your own bubble and sort of try and sort of bulldoze your way through it, it's just simply not going to work. And one has to advise your clients and say, right, okay, it slightly in the same way that in 2008 there was a perception thing that holding events was actually not the right thing to do in the face of the economic meltdown. Similarly, you've got this terrible health scare, also combined with a perception scenario of what actually is the right thing to be doing in the future and what is not. And it's very, very important that we strike the right balance there as well.
Sure. Listen, Charlotte, real nice to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Good luck. We're, of course, willing you on, and maybe we'll check in again at some point down the line, Charlotte.
Thank you very much indeed for having me on.
Charlotte Gentry, who is the founder and CEO of Pure Events and now Pure Communications as well.